Welcome to Cowboy Smart Money, a podcast provided to enhance the financial strength and resilience of service members in the state of Wyoming. I'm your host, Tech Sergeant Jackie Marshall, and co-hosting with me today is Sergeant First Class Frank Marquez. On today's episode, we are talking about the dreaded T word, taxes, and the April 15th deadline is right around the corner. Do you struggle to complete them each year? Do you need to file an extension? Or would you like to learn a little bit more about the process? Well, that's exactly what we're going to help you with on today's show. Joining us today is Mr. Glenn Lyons. Glenn serves as the personal financial advisor for the Wyoming Military Department. Glenn is a chartered life underwriter and chartered financial consultant with 30 years of experience providing financial advice and counsel. And he also is a former Marine. We don't want to leave that out. He's available for financial planning. He can provide counseling on everything from budgets and spending plans and retirement planning. Welcome, Glenn. We're glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Sergeant Marshall. I enjoyed being here and appreciate the opportunity. So one thing that I do want to make clear at the outset is that the information that we're covering is primarily for financial planning purposes and general tax information. I am not a certified public accountant, nor an accountant of any kind, and I do not specialize in taxes. I am a financial planner.
So let's talk about tax planning.
Yes, the dreaded T word. The first part of our discussion is going to revolve around tax planning as an overall part of your financial planning, simply because managing your taxes is going to help you better understand how to manage the rest of your money, and it's going to help you to get a good handle on how much extra money you do have to manage.
So let's talk about W-4s. What is a W-4?
Yes, the W-4, and people get these confused, the W-4 and the W-2. But essentially, the W-4 is the form that you fill out for your employer that it explains to them how many exemptions you can claim and therefore how much to withhold from your income for tax purpose.
So, Glenn, you've just told us what a W-4 is. So what is a W-2?
So the W-2 is the form your employer mails to you that provides evidence of how much your income has been withheld for income tax purposes, so it can be compared to how much tax you actually owe for the prior year.
When can most folks expect a W-2 in the mail from their employer?
They are supposed to have it by the 31st of January. However, oftentimes that deadline gets missed because of inefficiencies in the system, corrections that need to be made. You should certainly have it by the first part of April.
So can you tell us why it's important to claim exemptions correctly?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of times people that I work with end up claiming fewer exemptions than they're entitled to, and the result of that is often a larger tax refund. The problem with that, which I'll go into more information here later, is that too much money is withheld from your income.
And we don't want that to happen.
No. What I would say is that a lot of times clients will use their W-4 withholding as a savings account so that they can get a large tax refund at the end of the year. The problem with that is if, for example, you got a $6,000 tax refund at the end of the year, and that's not terribly unusual in the work that I see, that is $500 a month more in your pocket that you could have had that you have essentially loaned to the government at no interest. And the problem with that is oftentimes these same clients will be carrying credit card balances that they're paying 18% interest or more on. And so you're loaning your money to the government throughout the year at 0%, and you are paying credit cards or other lenders upwards of 18% for the privilege of using their money. There's a problem with that picture.
So you essentially could be, with that extra money, you could be paying off paying a lot more on those credit cards, paying
That's
those
correct.
down.
And then you can add to that the stress both on yourself and your family of carrying large amounts of debt throughout the year. And then you're looking forward to this one-time payout of your tax refund, which you then just turn around and pay off both the interest and the principal on the debt that you accumulated. It is also an opportunity cost that is missed because you could have been saving or investing that money and actually earning a return on it.
That's a really good lesson for a lot of people. And I guess that's why we're calling the show Cowboy Smart Money. I mean, that's a really good tip for people to think about.
Okay, so let's move on to some basic information. First, reiterate that the deadline is April 15th. And then if somebody does miss that deadline, what's next? What's the next step?
So that's correct, Frank. April 15th this year is the deadline. However, in years past, and I'm sure in years future, that deadline floats a little bit, depending on whether or not there's a holiday or if that date falls on a weekend. However, for 2019, it is April the 15th. In the event that you miss that deadline or you're unable to file your tax return by April the 15th of this year, there is a form, and that is Form 4868, which is a request for an extension, which is automatically granted, and that allows you to extend that deadline out to October the 15th.
Okay, that's definitely a form that I'll probably need to complete because I know I'm headed toward that.
One thing that I would remind you is that if you owe taxes for the year, those taxes are still due on April the 15th. The deadline does not extend the deadline to pay those taxes, and if they are not paid, you are subject to penalties and interest on what's due.
So the moment you miss that deadline, you're accruing interest on the amount that's owed.
That is correct.
Okay. So I'm going to hurry.
Very good to know.
So moving on, what are some of the resources available to service members to help with some of their tax questions and filing?
There are a lot of resources that are available privately. Military OneSource, however, is a resource that is available to all military members at no cost. There are CPAs on staff at Military OneSource that you can directly speak to on the phone and ask tax questions to. The other resource that we have here locally is Warren Air Force Base. There is a tax center at Warren Air Force Base that is available at no cost to service members.
And we'll include these resources, links to them in the podcast as well for folks interested.
So these services are available online, but you can also show up in person.
That is correct. Well, Military OneSource is not available in person.
Back to you, Jack.
Thanks, Frank. So should I use a CPA? And what is a CPA?
CPA stands for Certified Public Accountant. A certified public accountant is an accountant that has obtained some professional designations that allows them true expertise in the field of accounting and tax planning. And my answer to that is that CPAs can be an invaluable resource for a lot of different people, especially if you itemize your deductions, if you have a small business, or if your tax problems are more complex, if you have estate planning issues, those kinds of things where a 1040EZ is not going to solve the whole problem.
Can you speak to any examples of how, like a CPA, have you, or maybe examples of you've saved somebody money or something that they had no clue about?
What I can speak to is my own personal experience with a CPA, and having owned a small business for 22 years, my own private practice, I have employed the services of a CPA for most of that time. And CPAs have enabled me to find tax deductions that I did not know exist. They have helped keep me out of trouble in terms of the documentation that I'm required to keep. And they do stand in for you in the event that you're audited, so that you have got someone that knows the tax law when they're dealing with an auditor.
That's great, especially it seems like there's a lot of folks in the military here, or, spouses that have their own businesses. So it would be very beneficial for them to use those if they haven't yet. So that's a great tip. And so, Glenn, can you tell me, does it cost anything to file my tax return?
The IRS doesn't charge you to file your tax return. And if you use Military OneSource, or the tax center over at Warren Air Force Base, you're not going to pay anything. However, in the event that you do employ an accountant or a tax firm like H&R Block or Liberty or one of those, or CPA, you are going to have to pay those people for their services. My experience has been that the CPA, if your tax planning is that complicated, is well worth whatever it is that you're going to pay them.
Can you give us a ballpark figure on what it costs for a CPA or to?
For a business return, I can tell you that I generally end up paying around $500 a year for a CPA. And that includes a Schedule C business return, itemized tax deductions. It includes a partnership return. That's quite a lot of work. I would think for just a traditional tax return that is not terribly complicated, somewhere in the neighborhood of $300, but it does vary by region.
Compared with money you'll gain, or
right, if you can save some additional taxes, oftentimes that will more than pay for the services of a professional tax planner.
Back to you, Frank.
Thank you, Jackie. So how does Jackie pay the government if she owes taxes?
She would normally write a check that she would send in with her tax return. If you e-filed that tax return, you would obtain the address of the IRS, make sure that you put your Social Security number on the check, and send it directly to the IRS.
What if I can't pay what I owe by April 15?
Well, that's a good question, and the best thing to do is to contact the IRS. And normally, that's probably going to be a process rather than an event. Oftentimes, the IRS may not have seen your tax return when you call. It's in process. In my experience working with clients, if they send the tax return in with a check that is insufficient to pay the taxes due, or they don't send a check at all, the IRS will contact them. However, they will not call you, and they will not threaten you with jail. That's often a scammer's approach. You will get a letter from the IRS, and it will indicate how much money you owe, and it will invite you, if you are unable to pay that, to call them directly and work out a payment arrangement.
And what if I've already filed, but I discover a mistake was made on my form?
Then you would use a Form 1040X to file an amended return and correct the mistake that was made.
What if you are told by the IRS that someone else already filed a return in your name and claimed your refund?
That is really bad news, because what that means is that someone has assumed your identity and filed a fraudulent tax return in your name, often with the motive of obtaining a refund that belonged to you. what you would have to do in that case is you would file an identity theft affidavit, which is Form 154039, and that is available also on the IRS website. And you would do that as soon as possible. You would probably also file a police report that had happened, because what you're trying to do here is to document that this has happened so that you have a good paper trail to trace it back. You can also call the IRS directly, and there's a very special phone number for fraud at the IRS, and that is 800-908-4490. It's 800-908-4490. And let the IRS work with that and you in order to get that corrected.
So back to somebody stealing my identity and my money.
Uh-huh.
What can someone do to prevent this from happening?
Okay, there are a number of steps that you can take, but the first and foremost is to do your level best at a personal level to prevent someone from obtaining your Social Security number and your personal information. You can do things like not putting your Social Security card in your wallet, for instance, and taking it with you, because if someone steals your wallet, then they've got all of your personal identification numbers. Okay. The other thing that you can do specifically with regard to your tax return is you can call that same phone number that I listed earlier and request a personal identification number from the IRS. And normally when you e-file, especially if you are using a tax accounting service, they will obtain a personal identification number for you, which you need to have in order to file your tax return. That will prevent someone else from doing that in your name.
And then how do you prevent somebody from getting your PIN? Oh, I'm just kidding.
Well, Glenn, it was great having you here today.
Semper Fi.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your time and the opportunity.
If folks have questions for Glenn, you can reach him at 307-772-5362, or you can email him at WyomingFinancialCounselor@gmail.com. And also, at no cost, you can have an appointment with Glenn for a personal financial planning appointment. So take advantage of that. That's definitely something that I had no idea about. So that's a really great thing to have here.
I'll expect to see you.
Exactly. And I want to thank you all for listening. This is our first episode of Cowboy Smart Money. On our next episode, we'll be talking about ID theft. If you have questions about ID theft, email them to wyogard@gmail, and we can answer your questions on the next podcast. Also, if you're following us on Facebook at YOGuard, you can comment or message us there. And if you have any topic ideas for this financial podcast, please reach out to us and let us know. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.